Make sure you go check out my best-selling book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It'll show you how attackers look at you so you can look at yourself and target yourself and come up with better defenses. And for the children, ages 1 through 8, and if you have a learning disabled child, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book of pictures you give to the child. Each picture has about 5 lessons of awareness and security and communication built into the pictures, and then you, the parent or teacher, go to teamlittlebigs.com and get the lesson plans. There's also pictures that you can print out and color together, whatever. There's all different kinds of videos and stuff that will help you teach your children how to be aware, how to be secure, and how to communicate with you. It's all there, folks. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Go get them wherever books are sold. I actually did that commercial in under a minute. Let's start the show.
The truth has arrived.
My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And welcome back to the show. It is Wednesday. This week is just jetting by, and it is another day, second day in a row of crazy headlines. And what's interesting about what is happening today, or no, what is being reported today on Drudge. You remember, Drudge, what's good about Drudge, the Drudge Report, is that you can go here and you can see all the weirdness that the left puts out there. And it's all on here, and it always paints a picture. That's why I like Drudge. Not because I'm getting real news from it, but because it does paint a real picture in the narrative. And I don't even know if they realize that they're doing this, because they take what the Drudge Report is an aggregate of all these different publications and online publications and print paper, which there's not many newspapers that are print now, but all this stuff is from online basically. And then they put the stories up there. And so every day it reads like a billboard for how the left is trying to guide your thinking, or how it is guiding the thinking of at least half of this country. And some of the stories you'll see on Fox News, you'll see some of those being reported on Newsmax and One American News. But what you have to see is that there's this narrative or narratives that are leading people to feel certain ways about certain things. And when you look at this and you look at how they collect this information and put it up there, it's the most popular stories is what they're doing. They're putting the most popular stories from other publications up there. You start to see what it is that, and you can almost predict where this is going to go by looking at this. So you can look at a lot of these things and say, okay, if they're reporting this, that means that they feel this way, which means they're going to start, if they're not already, they're going to start to try to push laws and bills and executive orders to influence or control, and then they're going to start putting rumors and spread opinions where they try to mask it as reality, and they put these opinions out there and they try to affect the way people see things. And today was really a good, blatant example of that. I mean, it's always pretty blatant, but today you can kind of see exactly what they're talking about. And I'm not even going to go into great detail. I say this all the time. It's going to be a shorter show, and it ends up being an hour and 10 minutes, or hour and 15 minutes. But today is probably going to be a shorter show because I don't have to read into a lot of these stories. The headlines tell it all today. So I'm going to literally start at the top of the Drudge Report, and I'm going to go through these headlines and show you, and hopefully you'll pick up on this, right? First, I'm going to go through the majority of them, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to show you where this narrative flows from and how it's flowing, okay? So let's start at the very, very top of the Drudge Report. If you would, please dial your World Wide Web over to the Drudge Report, and you can follow along. Okay, so the first headline showed, it's in red. Showdown. First case against mandatory vaccines filed in New Mexico. Okay, so there throughout this, well, let me just go on and you'll see. Okay, that's the first headline. I'm not even going to say anything, and I'm not going to read every single headline, but I'm going to read the ones that are the most prominent and stick out there. Second headline, the military may require jab. They're talking about how the military may require active duty members to get, probably reservists as well, to get the vaccine. Next one, third of personnel refused to take. Now, I want you to remember that, okay? 1/3 of the personnel refused to take this vaccine. I have a feeling that a lot of those people are conservative, okay? I just have this feeling, or they don't trust government, and that's why they don't want to take it. That's what I'm thinking. So hold that in the back of your brain. That'll play into a little bit more of the headlines that follow. The next headline, CVS and Walgreens. That's CVS and Walgreens are going to use customer data to keep in touch. There's a whole nother story we should talk about sometime about CVS and Walgreens and the reality of Walgreens, how powerful they are in the pharmaceutical, or at least the pharmacies around the country. But we'll talk about that another time. Okay. Next headline, a prominent archdiocese urges Catholics to avoid the shot. Now, this is interesting. I didn't know this, and it's actually legit because I read up on it, that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine uses I can't remember what they call them. It's cultures that they took from aborted fetuses. One was in 1974. The other one was, I think, 74. It was in the early 70s. The other one was in the early 80s. And those two aborted fetuses, they took the cells from, I think it was the liver of the one early in the 1970s, and the eye of the fetus in or these were cells that were going to form an eye in the 1980s, and then they have derived vaccines using that fetal tissue. So Johnson & Johnson's new vaccine that's coming out, they say you only have to have one dose, is derived from the 1980s aborted fetus. Now, I'm not a doctor, and this is maybe something I should have Dr. Lucarini on here to talk about, but the prominent archdiocese urges Catholics to avoid it. Now, I'm not Catholic, but this is very interesting. It's a moral dilemma in this, that's where this derives from, and they're saying that new fetus tissue is not being used in that. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case, because they do say in one of the things that I was reading that fetal cells are being used. They don't specify that it just goes back to that one from 1985. This is very interesting. So anyway, that is the fifth headline on Drudge. And I was thinking that it was going to be a fake story, but it's not a fake story. Chinese vaccines, this is the next one. Chinese vaccines sweep much of the world despite concerns. Well, of course, the Chinese are going to get their vaccine out there faster and more predominant than anybody else. That's what they do. Now, if you're stupid enough to take the Chinese version of the vaccine, well, you might as well go ahead and start wearing fake Nikes and carrying a fake Louis Vuitton purse, because you should never trust anything that China produces. Look, I'm building a motorcycle, okay? I love this thing, and it's going to be a crazy street rod Harley, and I bought some drag pipes from this company, and I'll have to get the name of the company, but they're all over, because I've been doing research as I go through looking at all these different things and parts for the bike, and this one name keeps coming up in all these parts, and when I get the box of the pipes, it was made in China, of course. And so I start to learn about how a lot of this stuff that, you know, when you buy for your bikes, pipes and things like that, it's all made in China. And when you go to fit it, well, it didn't work. I had to send them back. And here's a little, I know I'm going all over the place here, but if you buy something from eBay and it doesn't work, you may have to pay the shipping to get that back. And I did. Even though it was so unfitted that it literally, if I would have kept those pipes on my bike, my leg would have been riding on the pipes. It wouldn't have worked. It would have been unsafe. It would have burnt me. And I don't know if you know this, but the pipes that come out, where they come out of the motor of a motorcycle, are about 1,200 degrees. So you go down the pipe, they may cool down to 800 degrees, but you don't want your leg touching that. That's why, you know, you should never ride a motorcycle with shorts on, or capris, which I've heard of women wearing capris and getting their leg fried because I don't know what people are thinking when they wear shorts with bikes. But I mean, if you have pipes that are wrapped and stuff, you shouldn't be wearing that stuff anyway when you're riding a bike. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, the point being, had I known that these pipes, because I'm learning about all this stuff, had I known that these pipes were made in China, I would never have gotten them, because I worked in the FBI for a long time. I know exactly, in New York, by the way, and I know exactly how the Chinese work and what the quality of their product. It's horrible, but they can mass produce it faster than any other nation. And so that's when I look at the vaccines, I look at it the same way. I wouldn't touch it if it was a Chinese vaccine. So let's see here. They're saying that the next flashpoint is going to be passports, right? Because I can guarantee you this is what's going to happen. If you want to travel somewhere, they're going to mandate that you have a vaccine. That's what's going to happen. Nobody is even remotely looking at the fact that, like myself, I had COVID in April of last year, right? So it's coming up on a year, and we have not heard definitively if your immunity stays or not. All we hear about is a vaccine. We're not hearing anything. Consider this, folks. Hundreds of millions of people have had this virus. Shouldn't they be doing some studies and proving one way or another how long these antibodies last? But you're not hearing that. You're only hearing about whether or not you should get the vaccine and what you can and can't do without having a vaccine. You know, we don't actually know how long the antibodies last and how much our ability is to fight the virus after we've had it. I would like to know that. And why am I even asking that question after a year? This is how bad it is. So now they're saying that the next flashpoint is going to be passports. And I can guarantee you that's going to be what it is. You're going to be restricted from travel if you don't get it. And I wouldn't doubt if they try eventually, knowing the Democrats, that they'll try to do something about state-to-state travel, which Cuomo already tried to do. The next headline, this is a big headline, is masks off Texas, open 100%, conflicting messages. Well, Texas is going maskless, and they're following the lead of Florida, which DeSantis has done an amazing job in Florida, and I haven't been down there since COVID started. You feel free when you're down there, and by and large, the responsibility to wash your hands and keep yourself clean is up to you. And they're doing fine. They're doing fine down there. And so Texas is following their lead, and good for them. I mean, the reality is you have to protect the elderly. You should be protecting the elderly from flus, which have seemed to disappear. I have a whole theory on that as well. Next headline, 29% of Americans support country being split into regions. Okay, so now we've moved from the virus, we've moved to the division in the nation. And they're talking about how, I don't know how they come up with 29% of Americans believe in split into regions. I wouldn't want the nation to be split into regions. I would rather it be split in two if it had to be split at all. or a leader that came in and actually said, no, we're not going to split this nation, but we're going to bring the freedoms back and give personal responsibility back. And if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. That would be great. That would really be great. Next headline, alarm over declining birth rates among younger generations. Well, that's been going on for a long time. Next one, billionaires seek crew for fun trip around the moon. Whatever, I don't care about that. Now we shift to Cuomo. Cuomo under pressure to quit as third woman alleges harassment. And if you haven't seen that picture, I talked about it yesterday. It is a horrific picture of him holding this girl's head, the back of her neck at a wedding, and he asked her if he could kiss her, I think is what the deal was. And he's biting his lower lip, and it is the creepiest thing I have ever seen. It is like, ugh. And she looks horrified. So says that he goes into hiding. He must have gone into hiding again because he was in hiding before. Yeah, he could be compelled to testify. These are all the headlines I'm going through. Was quick to tell others to step aside over sex claims in the past, which he's had some really horrific tweets that are coming back to haunt him now, where he was charging against other people who had just accusations led or lowered on them. Talks about his brother on CNN, and then the Schmidt Group. I have no idea what that is, but USA not prepared to defend or compete in the AI era. That's artificial intelligence area. Interesting, not a surprise, because other nations are it is kind of a surprise because we own Silicon Valley. Well, we don't own it, but it's in the United States. And I can guarantee you they are doing a tremendous amount. I know they're doing a tremendous amount in the AI. I know people that work in that area, and they're doing tremendous work. But I can only imagine what other nations are doing in the areas of artificial intelligence. And here's where the dilemma is, right? It's the same thing with terrorism. Terrorists, they don't follow the rules of war. They'll do whatever they want. And it's the same thing with AI. There's certain moral and ethical things that you should and shouldn't do, but they're going to toy with disaster in making themselves stronger and their product bigger and badder. That's what other nations are going to do. There's no moral or ethical boundaries for them. For us, a lot of times it comes down to moral and ethical boundaries, and although they stretch those as well, that's why we would be behind in those races. Microsoft sets stage for mixed reality future. Here's where it shifts again, and this is maddening right here. FBI director says domestic terrorism cases have soared in recent months. Now, I want you to ask yourself something. Have you heard, besides January 6th, of anything domestic terror related? I mean, true domestic terrorism. January 6th was not domestic terrorism. I don't care what they say. It was a bunch of people, QAnon weirdos or not, it was a bunch of people who are pissed off because our freedoms have been restricted, and they went to Washington, D.C., the ones that went inside the Capitol building. The majority of those people were motivated to send a message to Washington, D.C. that it needs to be reset back to where it was, not to overthrow the government. Now, of course, there was other weirdos in there that went in there, and I don't know what they were thinking, but they're blind followers, like a cult is basically what it is. And so cult members, just like in Jonestown, they drank Kool-Aid and died. Well, these idiots went into the Capitol building and had no clue what they were going to do once they got in there. So, but other than that, listen, one thing you got to understand, when the FBI director says that any type of cases have soared, you have to remember that's cases, right? I remember listening to Comey one day testify, and he was saying that they're working at any given time, they're working over 1,000 terrorism cases in the United States. But at the end of the year, they only really turn out to be a handful of cases that are real, right? But if somebody calls from Afghanistan because somebody in America owes them $1,000, and then it's very likely that person is going to call the FBI and say, you know, Muhammad is in New York, he's a taxi driver, and he's a terrorist. Well, then we have to, in the FBI, we have to take that case. and we have to follow that case. And they may have people on them. They go get a FISA. They start doing surveillance and pulling all the records, and they're on this person until they vet them out and find out whether or not they're really up to something. And almost all the time, with the exception of a handful of cases, it turns out to be nothing. Well, that's exactly what's happening when the FBI director gets up there and tells everybody that domestic terrorism cases have soared in recent months. He's also not saying to people how these cases are classified. They're not classified by white supremacy or black supremacy or Islamic terrorists. They're not going to say Islamic. They'll say ISIS, and they'll put them into categories. They'll say international terrorism or domestic terrorism, but you have to understand, if somebody believes in Islam and they attack and they're from the United States, they're going to be categorized as a domestic terrorist. So people don't realize that. And so when it's reported in here, the illusion or the narrative is that people will automatically think white supremacists. And that's not the case. That is not the way that these things are unfolding, and that's not the way they're investigated. Because they can't. How can they classify crimes by the color of your skin or by your religion? They're not going to do that. I mean, they could, but that's not the way they do it. Let's see here. They say that the threat is on par with ISIS. That's what he says. I need to see if there is, and when I come back to this, if there is a soundbite in here. I don't know. I'm sure I can go on YouTube and get the soundbite, and maybe I'll save that for tomorrow, because today I don't want to get stuck on this one headline, because I want to show you the headlines. I want to show you this picture that they're building, okay? He declares that no fake Trump supporters at the MAGA riot. Well, he doesn't know that if they didn't arrest every single person that was there in the MAGA riot. So how can he declare that? I'm telling you, this guy, Christopher Wray, is one of the biggest buffoons to ever head up the FBI. Comey wasn't a buffoon, but Comey was a deceitful leftist and narcissistic fool. But this guy, Christopher Wray, I've talked to people in the Bureau. I've talked to reporters that cover the Bureau. And like, for instance, when he came out and said that Antifa is not an actual organized group, he was given information by people, probably leftists, and he just repeats that information. He's the most out of touch director of the FBI I think we probably ever had. Next headline. See where this is going. Military wages war on extremism in its own ranks. Let's see. Let's go back up there to that second headline where it says military may require jab, and the next headline, third of personnel refusing to take. Now, it's very interesting how the military is going after and identifying what they call extremism, right? So you in the military right now, by the way that they're defining extremism, is that if you're white and you believe profoundly in the Constitution and you believe, or you're vocal, that the government has skewed from its intended purpose, you are an extremist. That's what the military brass is thinking. That's what the Secretary of Defense believes. So you can see where this is going. You see, now as I'm reading all these headlines, you should start to see a picture of this narrative. Sarkozy was convicted. I don't know if you know about this. Former French prime minister, I think he's prime minister or president. I think he's prime minister. He was convicted, and the headline is Sarkozy's conviction carries echoes for Donald, because Sarkozy was convicted of corruption and influence peddling. So they're trying to say that the president, former President Trump, is being looked upon in the same way with corruption and influence peddling. They're saying that, let's let's see here. Let me move up to the next. Okay, here's a good one. Will Smith mulls entering politics. Now, there's a thing on about the 14th Amendment on Netflix right now. I don't even have the motivation to watch it, but he hosts that, and it's a bastardization of the reality of the Constitution. And we need Will Smith in politics about as bad as we need Al Sharpton in politics, right? Will Smith, if you didn't know this, is a Scientologist. I've talked to people who worked with him in movies, and they said he is an egomaniac to the extreme that they've never seen before. And he just is a bully to people. But he's a Scientologist, and that's the way they are. You know, if you haven't read up on Scientology, these people, it's all, their entire lives are about themselves. It's all about them. It's not about, what being the best person they can be for the grace of God. They're being the best person that they can be in any way possible. They can do that because it really builds narcissism, because they feel they deserve that. We don't need to see Will Smith in politics. There's plenty of people out there that are more qualified than him than just being an actor and a rapper. 13 people were killed and semi-truck hits SUV in L.A. They failed to mention in the headline, and let me see where this is coming from, what publication. This is from the AP. Of course, they're just going to say, California crash kills 13 of 25 people crammed into SUV. They don't say why they were crammed into the SUV. They were crammed in the SUV because it was a smuggler, and all these people all these Mexicans that they were smuggling from Mexico illegally. Let's see here. This is the next headline. Gay men detained after kissing on Mexican beach. Next headline. Homosexuality can be called mental disorder, rules Chinese court. See, they're saying again, every day in the Drudge Report, it's something about gay, transgender, or like we talked about yesterday, the threesome of these gay guys. Again, I don't care if you're gay or whatever, but you got to realize that these headlines are to stir up people and to get people divided. The whole activism of gay is just to get division caused, and they don't care about you. They don't care about you. It's all about activism. You're freer here in this country, as those headlines point out. You're freer in this country than anywhere else in the world. I mean, you're free to be whoever you want to be and whatever you want to be. What you putting it in people's faces and purposely trying to go out and challenge people on how they believe, and if it doesn't fit what you feel is right, then doing everything you can to condemn those people. That's not what falls upon you, and the hatred that falls upon you or the disgust that falls upon you is not because the rest of America are bigots or homophobes. It's because the activists, and some are gay and some are not, relentlessly try to punish people in this nation for not agreeing with the way that they feel, right? I mean, look, people don't like me because of my politics. I'm not going to go around and try to get laws changed so that they have to feel the way I feel. And they wouldn't ever feel the way I feel. They'll just end up hating and resenting me. But they don't care. They'd rather pass laws that force you to act and do things in a certain way, regardless of how you feel about them. They don't really care about how you feel. They use that as an excuse to divide. That's what that is. Dr. Seuss. Several of the books in the Dr. Seuss series won't be published anymore because they have racist images in them. Again, another thing that never seemed to be a problem until recently, because now the Democrats are in office, and that's what they do. They're just going to use these things to in their fake outrage. So Joe Biden, who's all behind this, evidently the nation is. This is the biggest problem we have, is that Dr. Seuss's book has pictures that they deem racist in them. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the shooting and murder rate is out of control. But the Democrats are going to solve that because they're going to pass legislation, or they're going to bring it up, which they talk about here in a little bit. And they're going to bring up the gun rights argument again, not to restrict the illegal guns that are being used in Chicago. No, they're not going to do that. They're going to restrict the law-abiding citizens' right to carry guns, because that's where they want to make the problem exist. They don't want to solve a problem. They want to make a problem, right? That's what they do. Dr. Seuss isn't a racist book, but they're going to make a problem. They're going to use that to cause division. Instead of fixing real problems like Chicago and in the inner cities around this nation, with the hopelessness, the learned helplessness, with the illegally obtained weapons everywhere, felons getting let out of jail early or not even going to jail when they do something, when criminals do something wrong because there's no bail laws, they want to create problems, folks. Look at Minnesota. Look at Minneapolis. Look at where George Floyd was killed, right? It didn't get better after that happened. They didn't go out there and try to say, listen, let's build the bridge between law enforcement and the inner city. This has to come to a stop now. We have to have police officers that are part of the community. If somebody does something wrong, then they should stop them, but they should be using good tactics, and we should support them and give them money and build this bridge and clean up the inner city and educate young kids and teach respect and paddle them when they're bad. No, they're not going to do that. After George Floyd, they burnt half the city down, and now the crime is out of control, even worse than it was before, because they tried to defund and get rid of the police department. That's the way the Democrats work. They don't fix problems, they make problems. Let's see here. The Pope warns mankind faces second great flood. Okay, first of all, there's nothing in the Bible about that. Secondly, this Pope is a communist. Anybody that's a Catholic right now, you need to take a pause and realize that you all need to do the same thing that the patriots need to do in this country. You need to rise up, and you need to insist that, well, in the United States, they need to insist and put force upon and weight upon politics and say this needs to change. Well, the Catholics need to get together and say, we don't want this Pope. He doesn't represent God. I mean, I don't believe anybody represents God except God himself, but that's what the Catholics believe. And if that's the case, evidently you feel like God is a communist, because you have a communist that alleges to be God's representative on earth. Believe what you want. Okay. Apocalyptic. They keep repeating this headline every day. Apocalyptic locust plague turns sky black as swarms ravage Middle East. They're trying to make that sound like there's that the Pope is warning of an apocalyptic thing, that these locusts are there, but those locust plagues happen all the time in that area. Of course, I talked about yesterday about former CIA director Brennan says he's increasingly embarrassed to be white. Okay, here's the next headline. Again, remember, the reason I'm reading these headlines to you is not only am I wanting you to see the flow of the narrative, but I'm wanting you to see how the headlines reflect what the left believes and the narrative that they want, and there's all these different levels of this narrative. So this headline says, study, eating meat linked to wide range of illnesses. Sounds like a leftist story to me, and that's on Yahoo. And it's one of these websites where all these websites now, you try to click on them, and they try to get you to accept for cookies, or they try to get you to subscribe, and they won't let you read the story. So they'll put these good headlines up there. I don't know. Are people doing that? If I see that there's something comes up, I just click out of it. I don't even stay on it. Okay, they're shifting the headlines again. COVID variant in Brazil overwhelms local hospitals, hits younger patients. Doesn't say anybody's dying. It just says that that people are getting sick. Races through Italy, especially among children. So now they're trying. I could see this occurring. I could see this virus, and who knows what's manipulating this virus? Who knows if it's the virus itself modifying itself, or if whoever started this is still putting variants of it out. I don't know. I have my theories on all that stuff, but again, as I talked about before, when you look at the headlines, a lot of the times the flow of all these headlines, you can kind of predict what's going to happen in the future. And you very well could say that now children are going to start getting it, which none of these stories are reporting that massive amounts of people are dying. They're just saying that hospitals overran. 11 months later, one of New Jersey's patients still battling symptoms. My opinion on a lot of these symptoms is the fact that for a year we've been sitting doing nothing, looking at our computer screens, watching TV. We've gotten fatter. Some people have worked out, but the gyms have been closed in a lot of places. People have become inactive, and sitting is terrible. I'm guilty of it myself. I've sat more in the past year than I ever have in my entire life. The narrative flips again. $4 gas returns to California. See, part of these headlines are actually giving example of what's happening because of the Democrats, because of the liberals. California is just a mess. And $4 gas in California is just because they can have $4 gas. There's no reason for there to be $2 gas in one place and $4 gas in the other, except for the fact that the price of gas isn't regulated and it gets out of control. That's just basically it, supply and demand. But when it comes to gas, I think there should be some regulations to the price, but it's not. It's one of the most taxed things that there is out there. Cities starting to ban new stations. I don't know if I talked about that yesterday, but I went and looked at this, and they're not tearing down gas stations, but some cities are banning any new stations, so you can't start a new gas station in some cities. Volvo is now going to be all electric. Man, I can't wait to get this Harley finished. To be able, as everybody goes more electric, I'm getting louder and more horsepower. I love that. The Dems jumpstart gun control efforts. So here you go. See, this is this story. I knew it was going to be in here. The Democrats are now going to start jumping on the bandwagon to start more gun control. Again, remember, this gun control, it's not to control the bad people from doing what they're doing. It's to control the good people from being able to protect themselves and exercise their Second Amendment rights. The House Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, who is one of the dumbest people in Congress, is on the forefront of this. It's his bill. It would extend how long the FBI can delay a sale before completing a background check from 3 to 20 days. By the way, criminals don't get a background check. While Thompson's bill, I guess it's the other congressman, would outlaw private sales of used guns unless they are processed through a licensed dealer. So the thing is, when the guns that are bought, private or not, are primarily never used in a shooting. It's the guns that are bought and sold illegally that are stolen. Those are used in felonious activity over and over again, and they flow throughout the system that way. Neither of those bills do anything about that. Let's see here. Stimulus checks should continue until COVID is history, senators say. So just keep doling out the money, which really doesn't make an impact in anybody's lives. $600, that was one of the last checks we got, or the last check we got, didn't do anything. I mean, that's food for 1 month. That's it. And that's not even for a big family. That's for one person who doesn't eat a tremendous amount. That's 1 month of food, right? COVID's been here and everybody's been locked down and out of work for a year. I don't know what they think giving $1,400 here or $600 there or even $2,000. It's not going to do anything. People are out of work. They're going to be starving. I'm really surprised more people haven't just completely, that more communities haven't just completely collapsed and it's chaos. I mean, maybe it's coming. I don't know, but hopefully things will start to open back up. criminals stole billions in unemployment benefits. That's been happening tremendously right now. Here's what's happening to this. And this is going off the narrative. This is just a news story. This is actually a real news story. They will apply because it was one of the credit bureaus had everything. Equifax, I think it was, had a breach of security. And if you had an account there, your social security number, everything about you is out there. So what they do is they go and apply for unemployment in your name, and because your addresses are all listed there, they have your stuff sent to your last known address. Now, if you've lived in the same home for a long period of time, then you're lucky. But what they do is they'll sign up, fill out the papers for unemployment, especially now during COVID when everything's online, and then they're going to have that stuff sent to your last known address, and then they also apply for these, not checking accounts, but they're debit cards that are fillable. So what they do is, and then that stuff will be sent to that last known address too, and then they pick that stuff up. And once the checks are approved, because you're unknowing, because it's going to your previous address and they're picking it up, then they start having those checks deposited every month into that debit card. And that's how it's a Nigerian scam. So I know a lot of people who this happened to. All of a sudden they get something from the government saying that that they're being reviewed for unemployment, and then the next day they get a debit card that they didn't apply for from the bank. And what you have to do if this occurs, first of all, you should go out right now and immediately run your credit and see if anything has happened on your credit lately, and put a freeze on your credit. That way they can't. It has to be approved for you to get a credit card or a loan. You can still get it, but when you put a freeze on your account, basically it won't let anybody else do anything with your credit. So you need to do that. And then, and if you find that there's anything about unemployment or these debit cards have been opened in your name, then you need to cancel those things and contact the local government about that. Now, I hope that as I went through those headlines that you see the narratives that's flowing through there. Everything that you see on the news during the day, if you watch television, you're going to see those headlines magnified throughout the online publications. And by and large, these online publications, that does include CNN and Fox News and all these other ones. Those are the things that people are going to clip the web address, and they're going to post that stuff on social media. If there's a video they can copy and paste, they'll do that. So when you start to see how what they're talking about and the headlines that they're putting out there, you start to see where the government, the leftist, socialist, communist government is in Silicon Valley, and all these activists, you can start to see where they're flowing. All of you people out there that follow QAnon or used to follow QAnon, listen, it's as easy, all these quote unquote predictions that everybody thought that was being made, this is what it is. You look at the headlines, and if you know enough about what's going on and you understand and you can visualize the narrative, you can predict what the government is going to do, where the shifts are going to happen. I could have already told you after January 6th, even before the headlines hit, that the military was going to start cracking down. As soon as I heard that they were interviewing National Guard soldiers that were going to be there during the inauguration to vet out people who supported, really was conservative and patriotic things, they were going to weed those people out. I knew that the military was going to be next. And as soon as I saw who the Secretary of Defense is, I knew it was going to happen for sure. So they go in there and they're trying to weed out patriots within the military. They're trying to put a spin through the FBI that domestic terror is all over the place right now by white supremacists, by patriots, and QAnon weirdos. And what they're trying to do is weed that out of the military. Why would you want to do that? Because if anything ever happens, they can control the military. See, all during Obama administration and all that time, and everybody was like, "Oh, he's gonna bring out martial law and all these things. Obama's going to do this and he was going to do that. Well, the military, by and large, was conservative at that point. Now the military is filled with leftists. The FBI is filled with leftists. I'm not talking about liberal people. I'm talking about leftists. I'm talking about activist level leftists are in the military and in law enforcement and at these high level positions. And you could have predicted that if you understood the ebb and flow of the narrative and what was happening. You look at the headlines, you can see this stuff occurring. And many times, like when I was going through those headlines, it's predictive. And this is what you need to realize, that what is happening in this nation is predictive and it could be countered. You could stop a lot of these things if the people were organized, but they're not. Now, I want you to think about this today as you go about your day. I want you to think about the narrative that is being spun throughout media. Remember, a lot of things that the government does that the media reports on, the media is working hand in hand. They're the echo chamber for these government officials. And so they're going to report on what the lie that the government is saying so that they can get that influence out there and so they can spread the narrative before the government acts. That's what they're doing. So when you read the news, look for the narrative and you will be able to see what their next move is going to be. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here. Subscribe and share this.